Chapter 3, Reframing Reality with Sweet Optimism. When the world hands you stones, you need not build walls. Instead, craft stepping stones toward the light you wish to see. Every perspective is a doorway. Choose to walk through ones that lead to growth. Sweet wisdom from within, in the gentle rhythm of your breathing, in the quiet space between thoughts, lies a power so profound, yet so easily overlooked, that most people live entire lifetimes without recognizing its presence. This power doesn't require special training or expensive tools. It asks for no credentials or permissions. It simply waits, patient and ever-present, for the moment you choose to embrace it fully. This is the power of perspective, your sovereign ability to choose how you interpret every experience that touches your life. For those blessed with sweet souls, this power becomes both refuge and revolution, both shield and sword, that in a world that often seems designed to test the very qualities that make you most beautiful. When you understand that you hold complete dominion over the meaning you assign to every moment, every interaction, every challenge, you discover something remarkable. Your sweetness need not be a vulnerability to be protected, but a strength to be expressed with confidence and wisdom. The very sensitivity that others might see as weakness becomes your greatest asset when paired with conscious perspective choice. Yet this recognition often eludes sweet souls precisely because of their generous hearts. You're naturally inclined to assume responsibility for others' emotions, to interpret neutral events through a lens of self-doubt, to question your own perceptions when they conflict with the harsher voices around you. The world has trained you to see your tenderness as a liability, your empathy as a burden, your optimism as naivety. But what if everything you've been told about living with a sweet heart in a sometimes cold world has been fundamentally backwards? What if your capacity for warmth, properly supported by skillful thinking, gives you access to a richness of experience that more guarded souls can never touch? What if the very qualities that make you feel vulnerable are actually superpowers waiting to be fully activated? This chapter invites you to discover the profound truth that perspective is choice, interpretation is power, and your sweet nature, when supported by conscious thinking, becomes an unstoppable force for creating the life you truly desire. You'll learn not to build walls against the stones life throws, but to transform them into stepping stones toward the light you wish to see. The lens of perception, reframing for sustained sweetness. Your mind is an artist, and every experience that enters your awareness becomes raw material for the masterpiece of your reality. Like a painter choosing colors for a canvas, you unconsciously select which details to highlight, which emotions to evoke, which meaning to create from the neutral facts of any given moment. The question isn't whether you're interpreting, you're always interpreting. The question is whether you're doing so consciously, in service of your deepest values and highest well-being. For sweet souls, this artistic process of perception carries unique challenges. Your natural empathy means you feel others' emotions as if they were your own. Your generous heart leads you to assume the best in people, sometimes missing important warning signs. Your desire for harmony makes you prone to self-blame when relationships encounter friction. These beautiful qualities, untempered by conscious perspective skills, can leave you feeling overwhelmed by a world that seems increasingly harsh and unforgiving. Imagine for a moment that you've received sharp criticism on a project you care about deeply. Your automatic interpretation might be immediate and devastating. I'm terrible at this. I've failed. Maybe I should just give up. This single perspective choice can trigger a cascade of self-doubt that affects your confidence, your mood, and your ability to move forward. But you possess the same raw experience as anyone else facing criticism. The difference lies not in what happened, but in how you choose to interpret what happened. The critical words are neutral facts, sound waves in the air, or pixels on a screen, meaning nothing until filtered through your perceptual lens. Your interpretation is what transforms those neutral facts into a personal attack, professional inadequacy, or a future catastrophe. What you can realize in that moment is that you have other interpretive choices available. You might see the criticism as one person's frustrated attempt to be heard. You could interpret it as valuable feedback mixed with poor delivery. You might recognize it as a normal part of putting your work out into the world, something that says nothing about your fundamental worth as a human being. This is the profound truth that changes everything. You never respond to events themselves, but to your interpretations of events. Between any experience and your emotional response lies a moment of choice, a space where you can consciously select the lens through which you view what's happening. In this space lies your freedom, your power, and your ability to maintain your sweet nature regardless of external circumstances. The neuroscience behind this process reveals why perspective choice matters so deeply for your well-being. When you interpret an experience as a threat, whether to your safety, worth, or belonging, your brain activates its ancient protection systems. Stress hormones flood your bloodstream, your thinking narrows to immediate survival, and your capacity for the warmth and connection that define your sweetness dramatically diminishes. But when you interpret the same experience as a challenge or opportunity, entirely different neural pathways activate. Your brain releases different chemicals, your thinking expands to include creative possibilities, and you maintain access to the full range of your emotional and social intelligence. This isn't positive thinking or denial. It's conscious choice about which very real aspect of any situation you'll focus your attention upon. Sweet souls face particular vulnerabilities in this process because your natural inclination is to turn criticism inward rather than examining its validity or source. When someone treats you coldly, your first thought is often, "What did I do wrong?" rather than "They might be having a difficult day." When a friendship feels one-sided, you're more likely to question your worthiness than to consider the other person's capacity for reciprocal connection. This tendency stems partly from your beautiful desire to take responsibility for your impact on others. But it also reflects cultural programming that has taught you to question your own perceptions, to prioritize others' comfort over your own truth, to see your sensitivity as a character flaw rather than a gift. These learned patterns of interpretation keep you trapped in cycles of self-doubt that have nothing to do with reality and everything to do with habitual thinking. The path forward begins with recognizing that your interpretations are not facts, they're choices. Every time you tell yourself a story about what something means, you're exercising tremendous creative power. The question is whether you're creating stories that support your growth and well-being, or stories that diminish your capacity for the very qualities that make you most authentic. This recognition opens up extraordinary possibilities. If your interpretations are choices, then you can learn to choose differently. If your perspective shapes your emotional experience, then changing your perspective changes everything else. If your sweetness has felt like a liability, it's not because sweetness itself is problematic. It's because you haven't yet learned to interpret your experiences in ways that support and protect your tender heart. The locus of control principle becomes crucial here. You cannot control what others do, what they say, or how they treat you. You cannot control economic conditions, weather patterns, or global events. But you have complete sovereignty over the meaning you assign to these experiences. This is not a small consolation prize. This is the most powerful force available to human beings for creating the quality of life they desire. When you truly grasp this principle, criticism loses its sting because you recognize it as information rather than indictment. Rejection becomes redirection rather than personal failing. Conflict transforms from threat to opportunity for deeper understanding. Non-reciprocal relationships shift from evidence of your inadequacy to mismatches in capacity or values. Imagine you are in a role at work, in your family, or in your community, where you are frequently exposed to the struggles of others. Instead of letting each difficult story convince you that the world is becoming hopeless, you can choose to interpret your awareness of this suffering as evidence that there are people like you who care enough to pay attention. Each challenging situation can become proof of your courage and compassion, rather than confirmation of humanity's darkness. This single shift in interpretation can transform not only your own well-being, but your capacity to remain warm and effective in your life. Your interpretation of your own sweetness is perhaps the most important reframe of all. Instead of seeing your empathy as excessive sensitivity, you can recognize it as refined emotional intelligence. Instead of viewing your desire for harmony as weakness, you can understand it as sophisticated conflict resolution skills. Instead of interpreting your need for authentic connection as neediness, you can appreciate it as healthy relationship standards. This shift requires practice because your old interpretive habits are deeply ingrained. They've been reinforced by years of repetition and by a culture that often devalues the very qualities you embody most naturally. But like any skill, conscious perspective choice becomes easier and more automatic with consistent application. The practice begins with awareness. Throughout your day, notice the stories you're telling yourself about what things mean. When someone doesn't return your text quickly, what story do you create? When a project at work encounters obstacles, how do you interpret that experience? When someone responds to your warmth with distance, what meaning do you assign? Simply noticing these automatic interpretations without judging them begins to create space for choice. In that space, you can ask yourself powerful questions. Is this interpretation supporting my well-being? Are there other equally valid ways to understand this situation? What interpretation would allow me to maintain my capacity for warmth and connection? You'll discover that most situations contain multiple valid interpretations. The person who didn't text back might be overwhelmed with work rather than losing interest in your friendship. The project obstacles might be necessary course corrections rather than signs of failure. The person who responded to your warmth with distance might be protecting their own tender heart rather than rejecting yours. This isn't about forced optimism or denying real problems. Some criticism is valid and deserves attention. Some relationships are genuinely unhealthy and require boundaries. Some situations truly need to change. But even these challenging realities can be interpreted in ways that preserve your sense of agency and worth. The goal isn't to convince yourself that everything is wonderful, but to consistently choose interpretations that support your highest functioning. When you interpret challenges as opportunities to develop strength, you actually become stronger. When you interpret setbacks as valuable information, you actually become wiser. When you interpret others' behavior as reflecting their capacity rather than your worth, you actually become more capable of genuine love. For sweet souls, this reframing process is particularly powerful because it allows you to maintain your natural warmth without sacrificing your well-being. You can continue to approach the world with an open heart while protecting that heart through conscious interpretation. You can remain sensitive without being reactive, empathetic without being depleted, generous without being exploited. This is the first and most fundamental step toward optimistic living, recognizing that your perspective is your choice, and your choice is your power. Everything else builds from this foundation. When you truly understand that you are the artist of your own experience, you begin to paint a reality that honors both your sweet nature and your deep wisdom. Breaking free from limiting beliefs about sweetness. Deep in the unconscious recesses of your mind lie beliefs so fundamental that you rarely question them, yet so powerful that they shape every interaction, every decision, every possibility you allow yourself to consider. These beliefs about what it means to be sweet, sensitive, and emotionally available in today's world often act as invisible chains, constraining your potential and convincing you that your most beautiful qualities are actually weaknesses to be hidden or overcome. The journey of conscious perspective choice begins with examining these core beliefs, for they form the foundation upon which all your interpretations rest. Like a house built on shaky ground, even the most skillful reframing efforts will prove unstable if they rest upon beliefs that fundamentally undermine your worth, safety, or potential. Rational emotive behavior therapy offers a profound framework for this exploration, revealing how our emotional experiences are not directly caused by events, but by our beliefs about what those events mean. For sweet souls, this understanding is particularly liberating because it illuminates how cultural programming about kindness, sensitivity, and emotional availability has been unconsciously shaping your interpretations in ways that work against your natural strengths. The ABCDE model provides a clear structure for this transformation. Represents the activating event, what actually happens in objective reality. Whilst represents the beliefs you hold about what that event means. Quand represents the consequences, your emotional and behavioral responses. D represents disputation, the process of challenging irrational beliefs. A represents the effective new beliefs that replace the old, limiting ones. Let's walk through this model with a scenario you can imagine for yourself. A. The activating event is simple. A friend or colleague asks you for a significant favor that would require you to sacrifice your own time and energy. B. Your belief might be complex and destructive. Good people always say yes to help others. If I say no, I'm selfish and people won't like me. My worth depends on how much I sacrifice for others. C. The consequences of this belief are predictable. Overwhelming guilt when you even consider saying no. Resentment toward others who seem to have no trouble setting boundaries. And chronic exhaustion that diminishes your ability to offer the genuine care you value. D. Through disputation, you can learn to challenge the irrational elements of these beliefs. Where is the evidence that good people always say yes? Are there people I respect who sometimes say no? What is the quality of help I can provide when I'm exhausted and resentful? If my worth truly depends on sacrifice, does that mean I'm only valuable when I'm suffering? E. This process leads to effective new beliefs. Good people take care of themselves so they can sustainably care for others. Setting boundaries is a way of respecting both my needs and others' ability to be responsible for themselves. My worth is inherent, not earned through sacrifice. This process led to effective new beliefs. Good people take care of themselves so they can sustainably care for others. Setting boundaries is a way of respecting both my needs and my colleagues' need to develop their own responsibility. My worth is inherent, not earned through sacrifice. Sweet souls carry a particularly heavy burden of irrational beliefs because the culture has systematically devalued the qualities you embody most naturally. You've been taught that strength requires emotional distance, that success demands ruthless competition, that vulnerability equals weakness. These cultural messages become internalized as personal beliefs about what you must do to survive and thrive in the world. Let's examine some of the most common limiting beliefs that sweet souls unconsciously carry. I must be tough to be respected. This belief suggests that your natural warmth and empathy are inherently incompatible with strength and competence. The irrational element here is the word must. It assumes that toughness is the only path to respect, ignoring countless examples of leaders, teachers, and changemakers who earn deep respect through wisdom, compassion, and authentic strength. The disputation process might ask, what exactly is toughness? Is it the ability to ignore your emotions or the courage to feel them fully and still act wisely? Are there people I respect who lead with warmth? What if true strength includes the ability to remain open-hearted in difficult situations? An effective new belief might be, authentic strength includes both firmness and warmth. People respect integrity, wisdom, and genuine care, regardless of whether those qualities are expressed gently or forcefully. If I set boundaries, I'm being mean. This belief confuses kindness with boundarylessness, suggesting that saying no to others' requests is inherently unkind. The irrationality becomes clear when you consider that healthy boundaries actually enable sustained kindness by preventing the resentment and exhaustion that come from overextension. Disputation questions include, what is the difference between being mean and being clear? Can I think of times when someone's boundaries actually helped our relationship? What happens to my capacity for genuine kindness when I'm overwhelmed and resentful? A more effective belief, boundaries are a form of kindness to both myself and others. They allow me to give from fullness rather than depletion, and they teach others how to treat me with respect. Others' emotions are more important than mine. This belief stems from a beautiful capacity for empathy, but becomes irrational when it suggests that your emotional experience is somehow less valid or important than anyone else's. Sweet souls often carry this belief unconsciously, automatically prioritizing others' comfort over their own truth. The disputation process reveals the logical flaws. If everyone's emotions matter, why would mine be the exception? What happens to my ability to help others when I'm emotionally depleted? How can I model healthy self-care if I don't practice it myself? An effective replacement. All emotions carry important information. By honoring my emotional experience, I maintain the emotional intelligence and stability needed to genuinely support others. If someone doesn't like me, I must have done something wrong. This belief places the responsibility for all relationship dynamics solely on your shoulders, ignoring the complex factors that influence interpersonal chemistry. It assumes that universal likability is both possible and necessary for worth. Disputation reveals the impossibility. Is there anyone in the world who is liked by everyone? Do I like every person I meet? What factors besides my behavior might influence someone's response to me? Their past experiences, current stress, personal preferences, or emotional capacity. A healthier belief. Relationship chemistry is complex and mutual. Some people will resonate with my authentic self and others won't, and both outcomes say more about compatibility than about my worth. The world is becoming too harsh for people like me. This belief suggests that sensitivity and kindness are outdated qualities that cannot survive in modern society. It frames your sweetness as a liability and the world as inevitably hostile to your nature. Disputation questions challenge this worldview. Are there examples of kind, sensitive people thriving in today's world? What evidence do I have that the world is becoming harsher versus my exposure to more information about both positive and negative events? How might my sweetness actually be needed more than ever in challenging times? An empowering alternative. The world needs my sweetness precisely because there are challenging aspects to navigate. My sensitivity allows me to notice what others miss, and my kindness creates the connections that make life meaningful. The process of disputing these beliefs requires both intellectual honesty and emotional courage. You're not just changing thoughts, you're questioning fundamental assumptions about how the world works and your place within it. This can feel threatening to the parts of you that have organized your entire life around these beliefs, even when those beliefs cause suffering. It's helpful to remember that these limiting beliefs often developed as protective strategies. The belief that you must be tough to be respected might have helped you survive an environment where vulnerability felt dangerous. The belief that others' emotions matter more than yours might have kept you safe in a family where expressing your needs led to conflict or abandonment. Honor these beliefs for the service they provided while recognizing that what protected you in one context might limit you in another. You're not discarding your capacity for toughness when appropriate. You're expanding your options to include strength expressed through warmth. You're not becoming selfish by honoring your emotions. You're developing the self-awareness needed for genuine generosity. The disputation process works best when you approach it with curiosity rather than force. Instead of trying to convince yourself that your limiting beliefs are wrong, ask genuine questions about their validity. Look for evidence both for and against each belief. Consider alternative explanations for the experiences that seem to confirm these beliefs. For instance, if you believe that sweet people don't succeed professionally, examine this belief carefully. Define what you mean by sweet and success. Look for counterexamples in your field and others. Consider whether your definition of success aligns with your values, or whether it's been shaped by cultural messages that may not serve you. You might discover that many highly successful people integrate warmth with competence, that collaboration often produces better results than competition, that emotional intelligence is increasingly valued in leadership positions. This doesn't mean that challenges don't exist for sweet souls in certain environments. It means that your sweetness isn't the disqualifying factor you might have believed it to be. The goal isn't to eliminate all challenging thoughts or convince yourself that everything is perfect. Some situations genuinely require assertiveness. Some people truly are unkind. Some environments really don't support your natural style. But even these realities can be held within beliefs that preserve your sense of agency and worth. Instead of sweet people can't succeed in competitive environments, you might develop the belief, I can learn to express my strength in ways that work within different environments while maintaining my authentic core. Instead of unkind people prove the world is hopeless, you might hold, encountering unkind people reminds me why kindness matters and motivates me to contribute positively wherever I can. As you practice this disputation process, you'll notice that effective new beliefs share certain characteristics. They're realistic rather than purely positive. They acknowledge genuine challenges while maintaining hope and agency. They're flexible rather than absolute. They allow for nuance and adaptation to different situations. They're empowering rather than victimizing. They focus on what you can influence rather than what you cannot control. Most importantly, effective beliefs for sweet souls honor both your tenderness and your strength. They don't ask you to choose between being kind and being powerful, between caring deeply and maintaining boundaries, between authenticity and success. They recognize that these apparent opposites can coexist beautifully when supported by conscious awareness and skillful action. The transformation of core beliefs is gradual and requires patience with yourself. You're rewiring neural pathways that have been strengthened by years of repetition. Be gentle with the parts of you that resist change. They're trying to keep you safe according to old operating systems. At the same time, consistently practice thinking according to your new, more effective beliefs. Each time you catch yourself operating from an old limiting belief, pause and ask, what would I think, feel, or do if I truly believe that my sweetness is a strength? How would I interpret the situation if I knew that boundaries are a form of love? What action would I take if I fully trusted that my worth doesn't depend on others' approval? This practice gradually builds new neural pathways that support your natural gifts while protecting your well-being. Over time, you'll find that optimistic, empowering interpretations become more automatic. You'll notice challenging situations without immediately assuming you're at fault. You'll maintain your capacity for warmth without sacrificing your wisdom. This is the foundation upon which all other perspective skills rest. The deep knowledge that your sweetness is not a liability to be managed, but a strength to be skillfully expressed. When this truth becomes part of your core belief system, every other aspect of optimistic thinking becomes both easier and more sustainable. The power of perspective, cognitive reframing for sweet resilience. In the space between what happens to you and how you respond lies the entirety of your freedom. This space, often measured in mere seconds, contains the power to transform any experience from problem to possibility, from threat to opportunity, from evidence of your inadequacy to proof of your resilience. For sweet souls, learning to consciously inhabit this space becomes a sacred practice, one that allows you to maintain your tender heart while developing the emotional strength needed to navigate an increasingly complex world. Cognitive reframing is the sophisticated art of consciously choosing how to interpret your experiences. Unlike the unconscious interpretations that happen automatically, reframing involves deliberately seeking alternative perspectives that better serve your well-being and growth. This isn't about positive thinking or denying reality. It's about recognizing that every situation contains multiple valid viewpoints, and you have the power to choose which viewpoint guides your response. The beauty of this process for sweet souls lies in its alignment with your natural abilities. You already possess the empathy to understand multiple perspectives, the creativity to imagine different possibilities, and the wisdom to sense when something isn't quite right. Reframing simply directs these existing gifts toward your own experience with the same generosity you naturally extend to others. Imagine a supervisor or mentor criticizes your overly emotional response to a situation. Your initial interpretation might be devastating. I'm not professional enough. I'm too sensitive for this work. Maybe I should find a different path. This interpretation triggers shame, self-doubt, and a withdrawal from the very emotional engagement in your mind that makes you effective. Through reframing, you can learn to see the same feedback differently. This person may be concerned about burnout and wants to help me develop sustainability. My emotional engagement is actually a strength that helps me connect. I just need to learn better boundaries around it. This feedback is valuable information about how to maintain my effectiveness long-term. This new interpretation leads to entirely different actions. Instead of withdrawing emotionally, you might seek out resources on professional boundaries. Instead of questioning your path, you could have honest conversations with peers about managing emotional demands. Instead of seeing your sensitivity as a liability, you can learn to frame it as a professional asset that requires skillful management. The reframing process often reveals how sweet souls automatically interpret neutral or even positive events through a lens of self-criticism. When someone doesn't respond to your warmth immediately, your first thought might be, I'm being too much, rather than they might be shy, or they might need time to feel safe opening up. When a project you're passionate about encounters obstacles, you might think, I'm naive for caring so much, rather than, this project matters enough to overcome challenges, or these obstacles are providing valuable information about how to succeed. This tendency towards self-critical interpretation often stems from legitimate experiences where your sensitivity was criticized or your kindness was taken advantage of. Over time, you learn to anticipate rejection or exploitation by automatically interpreting ambiguous situations negatively. This protective strategy might have helped you avoid some disappointments, but it also prevented you from recognizing genuine opportunities for connection and growth. The systematic approach to reframing begins with recognizing these automatic interpretations without immediately trying to change them. Simply noticing, I'm telling myself this means I'm too sensitive, creates the awareness needed for choice. In that moment of recognition, you can ask yourself, is this interpretation definitely true? Are there other ways to understand what's happening? What interpretation would allow me to respond most skillfully? Let's explore specific reframing applications that address the most common challenges sweet souls face. Jaina, rejection reframe. When someone declines your invitation, doesn't return your emotional investment, or clearly indicates they're not interested in deeper connection, your automatic interpretation might be, I'm not good enough, or there's something wrong with me. A reframe perspective recognizes, this person and I aren't a good match right now. Their no is actually helpful information that saves both of us from investing in something that wouldn't be fulfilling. Their lack of interest in me says nothing about my worth and everything about compatibility. This reframe is particularly powerful because it transforms rejection from personal failure to useful guidance. Instead of evidence that you should change yourself to be more acceptable, it becomes evidence that you should trust the natural selection process that brings compatible people together while allowing incompatible connections to dissolve. Criticism reframe. When someone offers feedback about your behavior, work, or choices, sweet souls often interpret this as comprehensive judgment of their worth. The automatic thought might be, I'm terrible at this, or everyone thinks I'm incompetent. Reframing reveals, this person has specific concerns about specific aspects of what I'm doing. Their feedback contains information I can use to improve, mixed with their personal style of communication. I can extract the useful information while maintaining my sense of overall competence and worth. This perspective allows you to receive feedback without being overwhelmed by it. You can appreciate the person's effort to help you improve while recognizing that their delivery style and emotional state color how the feedback is presented. Most importantly, you can use the information without accepting the interpretation that you're fundamentally flawed. Non-reciprocity reframe. Perhaps nothing challenges sweet souls more than relationships where your natural warmth and generosity aren't reciprocated. The automatic interpretation often becomes, people are selfish, or I give too much, or I'll never find people who care as much as I do. Reframing offers, different people have different capacities for emotional expression and investment. This person's limited reciprocity reflects their current capacity, not their feelings about me or the value of my giving. I can appreciate what they do offer while seeking additional relationships that meet my needs for mutual warmth. This reframe prevents the bitterness that comes from expecting everyone to love the same way you do, while also validating your need for reciprocal relationships. It allows you to maintain your generous nature without depleting yourself in one-sided connections. Conflict reframe. Sweet souls often interpret any form of disagreement or tension as evidence that they're causing problems or failing to maintain harmony. The automatic thought might be, I'm making things worse, or I should just agree to keep the peace. Reframing reveals, healthy relationships require honest communication about differences. This conflict is an opportunity to understand each other better and find solutions that work for everyone. My willingness to address problems shows that I value this relationship enough to work through difficulties. This perspective transforms conflict from relationship threat to relationship opportunity. Instead of avoiding or immediately surrendering in disagreements, you can engage with confidence that working through differences often leads to stronger connections. Boundary setting reframe. When you need to say no to a request or establish limits on what you're willing to do, your automatic interpretation might be, "I'm being mean," or "good people don't disappoint others." Reframing offers, "Boundaries allow me to give sustainably rather than from depletion. By being clear about my limits, I'm actually being kind to both myself and the other person." This no to one thing enables a fuller yes to what matters most. This reframe is particularly crucial for sweet souls because it allows you to maintain your generous nature while protecting your energy and well-being. You can set boundaries without guilt, knowing that doing so actually enables greater generosity over time. The process of developing these new interpretations requires practice and patience. Your brain has been trained to interpret experiences through old patterns, and rewiring these neural pathways takes consistent effort. Start by choosing one specific type of situation, perhaps criticism or rejection, and practice reframing every instance you encounter. Notice how different interpretations affect your emotional state and subsequent actions. When you interpret criticism as information rather than attack, how does your body feel? What actions become possible that weren't available when you interpreted criticism as evidence of your inadequacy? When you interpret rejection as incompatibility rather than personal failure, how does this change your willingness to be vulnerable in future relationships? You'll discover that perspective choice is not just an intellectual exercise. It has immediate, tangible effects on your physiology, emotions, and behavior. Threat-based interpretations activate your stress response system, flooding your body with hormones that narrow your thinking and reduce your capacity for the warmth and creativity that define your sweetness. Challenge-based interpretations activate your growth response system, releasing chemicals that expand your awareness and enhance your ability to connect with others. This physiological difference explains why reframing isn't just feel-good psychology. It's a practical tool for maintaining your highest functioning in difficult circumstances. When you interpret challenging situations as opportunities to develop resilience, you actually become more resilient. When you interpret setbacks as valuable information, you actually become wiser. When you interpret others' behavior as reflecting their capacity rather than your worth, you actually become more capable of genuine love. The key to sustainable reframing lies in developing what we might call perspective flexibility, the ability to consciously shift viewpoints depending on what serves you best in any given situation. This doesn't mean forcing optimistic interpretations when realistic assessment is needed. Sometimes the most empowering perspective acknowledges that a situation is genuinely difficult and requires significant response. The goal is to consistently choose interpretations that honor your agency, focus on what you can influence rather than what you cannot control, preserve your worth, recognize your inherent value regardless of external circumstances, support your growth, frame challenges as opportunities to develop strength and wisdom. Maintain your relationships. Interpret others' behavior in ways that allow for connection when appropriate. Align with your values. Choose perspectives that support your commitment to kindness, authenticity, and growth. Advanced reframing techniques include perspective multiplication, deliberately generating multiple valid interpretations of the same situation and choosing the one that serves you best. When a friend seems distant, you might consider they're going through personal challenges, they're busy with work demands, they're giving you space they assume you need, they're processing something in the relationship, or they're simply in a different life phase. Each interpretation is potentially valid, and each would lead to different emotional and behavioral responses. Temporal reframing involves viewing current challenges in the context of your larger life journey. The project that's struggling today becomes part of the learning process that prepares you for future success. The relationship that's ending becomes the experience that teaches you what you truly need in partnership. The criticism you're receiving becomes the feedback that helps you develop skills you'll use for decades. Values-based reframing connects your current experience to your deepest commitments. When someone takes advantage of your kindness, Instead of interpreting this as evidence that kindness is naive, you can frame it as confirmation that kindness is precious and worthy of protection. When the world seems to favor aggressive behaviors over gentle ones, instead of seeing this as a reason to become harder, you can interpret it as evidence of how much the world needs the healing you offer. The mastery of reframing develops gradually through consistent practice. Start with small, everyday situations before tackling major life challenges. Notice your automatic interpretations without judgment, generate alternative perspectives, and observe how different interpretations affect your experience. Over time, this process becomes more natural and rapid. Remember that reframing is not about convincing yourself that everything is wonderful or that pain is actually pleasure. Some situations are genuinely difficult and deserve to be acknowledged as such. Some people do behave poorly, and their behavior has real consequences. Some losses are profound and require genuine grieving. The power of reframing lies not in denying these realities, but in maintaining your ability to respond with wisdom rather than react from woundedness. When you can interpret even genuinely difficult experiences through a lens that preserves your agency and hope, you maintain access to your full range of capabilities for healing, growth, and positive influence. This is the gift that perspective skills offer to sweet souls. The ability to remain tender-hearted without being broken-hearted, to stay open to life's beauty without becoming overwhelmed by its challenges, to maintain your capacity for love without sacrificing your wisdom. In a world that often feels designed to harden hearts and close minds, your commitment to conscious reframing becomes both personal practice and social contribution, a quiet revolution that changes everything. Catch, check, change, taming, and an inner critic for sweet self-encouragement. In the quiet spaces of your mind, a conversation runs continuously, sometimes a whisper, sometimes a shout, always present. This internal dialogue shapes your reality more profoundly than any external voice, determining how you interpret every experience, how you respond to every challenge, how you treat yourself through every triumph and setback. For sweet souls, this inner conversation often carries a particularly harsh tone, filled with doubt about whether your kindness is appropriate, worry about whether you're doing enough for others, and criticism that your sensitivity somehow makes you inadequate for the demands of modern life. The catch, check, change technique offers a systematic approach to transforming this internal dialogue from critic to supporter, from obstacle to ally. This process recognizes that you cannot simply silence negative thoughts, but you can learn to interrupt them, examine them, and consciously replace them with perspectives that support your growth and well-being. The beauty of this technique for sweet souls lies in its gentleness. Rather than fighting your thoughts or judging yourself for having them, you learn to observe your mental patterns with the same compassion you naturally extend to others. This approach honors your sensitivity while building the mental resilience needed to navigate a world that doesn't always appreciate your gifts. Catch, recognizing the inner critic's voice. The first step involves developing awareness of your automatic thought patterns, particularly those that undermine your confidence or question your natural strengths. Sweet souls often carry inner critics that have absorbed cultural messages about vulnerability being weakness, kindness being naivety, and emotional depth being excessive. Catching your inner critic requires learning to recognize the specific ways it attacks your capabilities. Imagine that a project you are leading or a person you are trying to help isn't improving as quickly as you'd hoped. Your inner critic might immediately chime in, "You're not helping. You're too emotional to be effective." Maybe you're actually making things worse. These thoughts can feel so familiar and automatic that you might not even recognize them as optional interpretations rather than factual assessments. The catching process begins with simply noticing when your inner voice shifts into critical mode. Often this happens so quickly and habitually that you skip straight from external event to emotional response without recognizing the interpretation that connected them. Learning to pause and identify the specific thoughts between trigger and reaction creates the space needed for conscious choice. Common inner critic themes for sweet souls include sensitivity shaming. "You're too sensitive for this world. Normal people don't get upset about these things. You need to toughen up if you want to succeed. Boundary guilt. You're being selfish by saying no. Good people sacrifice for others. Who are you to have needs when others are struggling? Comparison criticism. Everyone else handles stress better than you do. Other people don't need as much emotional support. You're weaker than people who seem more independent. Emotional invalidation. Your feelings are too much. You're overreacting. No one wants to deal with your emotions. Future catastrophizing. Sweet people like you will never make it in this competitive world. You'll always be taken advantage of. Your kindness will be your downfall. The key to effective catching lies in developing what mindfulness practitioners call meta-awareness, awareness of your awareness. This means noticing not just what you're thinking, but that you're thinking, and recognizing thoughts as mental events rather than absolute truths. This process often reveals how much of your inner dialogue consists of voices that aren't actually your own. The critic that tells you to toughen up might sound remarkably like a parent, teacher, or boss who struggled with their own sensitivity. The voice that questions your professional competence might echo messages from a culture that devalues emotional intelligence in favor of detached, analytical thinking. Recognizing these borrowed voices doesn't mean dismissing them entirely. They might contain useful information or reflect genuine concerns that deserve attention. But it does mean recognizing that they represent only one perspective among many possible ways of understanding your experience. Check examining thoughts for accuracy and usefulness. Once you've caught a critical thought, the next step involves examining it with the same careful attention you might give to any important decision. This isn't about immediately dismissing negative thoughts or forcing positive ones, but about applying rational analysis to determine whether your automatic thoughts are serving your highest good. The checking process asks several key questions. Is this thought factually accurate? Often inner critic thoughts contain distortions, exaggerations, or assumptions that don't hold up to careful examination. The thought, "I always mess things up," becomes questionable when you remember your many successes. The belief, "no one appreciates my sensitivity," loses power when you recall people who've specifically valued your empathetic nature. Is this thought helpful in this situation? Even thoughts that contain some truth might not be useful in the current moment. Reminding yourself of past mistakes might not be helpful when you're trying to take a creative risk. Focusing on all the ways the world can be harsh might not serve you when you're deciding whether to trust a new friend. What evidence supports this thought, and what evidence contradicts it? This rational analysis often reveals that negative thoughts focus selectively on certain types of evidence while ignoring contradictory information. Your inner critic might emphasize the times your kindness wasn't appreciated while overlooking the many times it made a meaningful difference. Where did this thought come from? Understanding the origins of critical thoughts can reduce their emotional impact. The voice that tells you to stop being so emotional might trace back to childhood messages about gender roles, cultural background, or family dynamics that prioritized emotional control over emotional intelligence. How does holding this thought affect my behavior and well-being? The most important question focuses on practical consequences. Does believing this thought motivate you toward positive change, or does it paralyze you with shame and self-doubt? Does it enhance your relationships or make you withdraw from connection? Imagine your inner critic constantly tells you that you are too involved in your relationships or your work. Through checking, you might discover that this thought contains both accurate and inaccurate elements. It may be true that you worry and care deeply, but it may not be true that this makes you unprofessional or ineffective. In fact, your emotional investment might be precisely what makes you so good at building trust. The checking process might reveal that this too involved criticism echoes a voice from your past, perhaps a boss or family member who believed that competence required emotional distance. You can realize that this perspective, while valid for some, doesn't align with your natural strengths. This examination allows you to separate useful information. Perhaps you could benefit from better self-care practices, from unhelpful criticism. Your natural warmth is a problem to be solved. You can address the practical concern without accepting the fundamental judgment about your approach to life. Change. Replacing criticism with encouragement. The final step involves consciously choosing thoughts that support your well-being while maintaining realistic assessment of situations. This isn't about positive thinking or self-deception, but about consciously selecting perspectives that enable your highest functioning. For sweet souls, this often means developing a voice of encouraging realism, one that acknowledges challenges while maintaining faith in your ability to navigate them skillfully. This internal voice sounds different from both the harsh critic and naive optimism. It speaks with the tone you might use to encourage a beloved friend facing similar struggles. Instead of "you're too sensitive for this world," the encouraging voice might say, "Your sensitivity is a gift that requires skillful management. You can learn to protect your energy while still caring deeply." Instead of "you're being selfish by having needs," it might offer, "Taking care of yourself enables you to take better care of others. Your needs matter as much as anyone else's." Instead of "everyone else is stronger than you," it could suggest, "People have different strengths and challenges. Your emotional intelligence is a form of strength that the world needs." The key to effective changing lies in developing affirmations that feel authentic rather than forced. Sweet souls often resist positive self-talk because it can feel dishonest if it doesn't acknowledge genuine challenges. The most effective encouraging thoughts are both realistic and hopeful, specific rather than generic, and connected to your actual experiences rather than borrowed from others. Imagine you are struggling with self-doubt about an unconventional approach you're taking. You can learn to replace the thought, "I'm not doing this right," with, "I'm finding my own way of doing this, and I'm seeing positive results." This reframe acknowledges that your methods are different without assuming they are wrong, and it grounds your confidence in observable outcomes rather than arbitrary standards. The changing process often involves developing multiple encouraging responses to common critical thoughts. When your inner critic attacks your sensitivity, you might respond with any of several truths. Sensitivity helps me notice what others miss. My empathy creates connection that enriches my relationships. Emotional awareness is a valuable skill in many situations. Or, I can be both sensitive and strong. Having multiple encouraging responses prevents your new thoughts from becoming rigid or mechanical. It also reflects the reality that different situations might call for different aspects of your encouraging inner voice. Advanced applications of the catch, check, change technique include thought diffusion, learning to observe thoughts as mental events rather than facts. When your inner critic says you're not qualified for this opportunity, you can notice, "I'm having the thought that I'm not qualified," and examine whether that thought deserves your belief. Values-based responding. Connecting your encouraging thoughts to your deepest values. Instead of generic positive statements, you develop affirmations rooted in what matters most to you. "My commitment to helping others motivates me to develop whatever skills I need," or "My authenticity is more important than others' approval." Compassionate reframing. Applying the same kindness to yourself that you naturally extend to others. When you notice self-critical thoughts, ask, "What would I say to a friend in this situation?" Then offer yourself the same understanding and encouragement. Growth-oriented encouragement. Focusing on development rather than fixed traits. Instead of "I'm good at this," which can feel false when you're struggling, try "I'm learning to get better at this," or "I'm developing the skills I need." The practice of transforming inner dialogue requires patience because you're rewiring neural pathways that have been strengthened by years of repetition. Be gentle with yourself when you notice the old critical voices returning. This is normal and expected. Each time you catch, check, and change a critical thought, you're building new mental habits that will eventually become as automatic as the old ones. The goal isn't to eliminate all challenging thoughts or convince yourself that everything is perfect. Sometimes critical thoughts contain valuable information about situations that need attention or skills that need development. The aim is to ensure that your inner dialogue supports your growth rather than undermining it, encourages your authentic self-expression rather than pressuring you to be someone else. For sweet souls, this transformation of inner dialogue is particularly powerful because it allows you to maintain your natural empathy and kindness, while developing the internal support system needed to express these qualities confidently in a challenging world. When your inner voice becomes an ally rather than an adversary, you can face external criticism, rejection, and misunderstanding with much greater resilience. This shift creates a positive feedback loop. As your inner dialogue becomes more encouraging, you feel more confident expressing your authentic self. As you express your authenticity more freely, you attract people and situations that appreciate your genuine nature. As you receive more appreciation for who you truly are, your inner dialogue has more positive evidence to draw upon. Over time, this cycle transforms not only your relationship with yourself, but your entire experience of being a sensitive, caring person in the world, from scarcity to abundance. Rewriting your sweet story. Deep in the unconscious architecture of your mind lies a fundamental assumption about the nature of reality. Whether there's enough goodness, love, kindness, and opportunity to go around, or whether these precious resources exist in limited quantities that must be carefully rationed and fiercely protected. For sweet souls, this assumption shapes every aspect of how you approach relationships, work, self-care, and your own authentic expression. The scarcity mindset whispers that your kindness is a finite resource that can be depleted, that caring for yourself somehow diminishes what's available for others, that there aren't enough people in the world who value sensitivity and authenticity. This perspective, often unconsciously absorbed from a culture that emphasizes competition over collaboration, creates a gnawing sense of limitation that affects everything from how you set boundaries to how you pursue your dreams. But what if this fundamental assumption is not only incorrect, but actually counterproductive to both your well-being and your ability to contribute meaningfully to the world? What if the qualities that make you most beautiful, your capacity for empathy, your commitment to authenticity, your desire for genuine connection, actually operate according to abundance principles rather than scarcity economics? Understanding this shift requires recognizing how scarcity thinking specifically manifests in the lives of sweet souls. Unlike those whose scarcity fears center primarily on money or material success, your scarcity concerns often focus on emotional and relational resources. Kindness scarcity appears as the belief that being generous with your warmth and care will eventually drain your reserves, leaving you empty and unable to function. This fear leads to emotional rationing, holding back your natural responses to avoid depletion. You might find yourself calculating how much kindness you can afford to give, worrying that too much generosity will leave you vulnerable or depleted. Imagine operating from a scarcity model of kindness. You might believe your compassion is like a bank account that can be overdrawn if you're not careful. This could lead you to create emotional distance from people you are most drawn to help, limiting your expressions of care to avoid burnout. Ironically, this emotional withholding can actually increase your stress and dissatisfaction, as it forces you to act against your own nature. The abundance reframe revealed a different truth. Kindness, when given from a full and well-tended heart, actually regenerates itself. The warmth you offer to others activates neural pathways associated with well-being, releases beneficial hormones, and strengthens your capacity for future caring. Rather than depleting your reserves, conscious kindness from a healthy foundation actually enhances your emotional resources. Energy scarcity manifests as the belief that taking care of yourself reduces the energy available for others. This fear keeps sweet souls trapped in patterns of self-neglect, where rest feels selfish, boundaries feel mean, and self-care feels indulgent. You operate as if there's a fixed amount of energy in the universe, and using any for yourself means less is available for those you love. The abundance perspective recognizes that energy, like kindness, follows regenerative rather than depleting principles when managed wisely. Self-care doesn't consume energy, it creates energy. Rest doesn't steal from others, it ensures you have something meaningful to offer. Boundaries don't reduce your availability for love. They protect your capacity for sustainable, authentic connection. Imagine that chronic exhaustion finally forces you to prioritize your own rest and self-care. To your surprise, you might find that the better you care for yourself, the more present and helpful you become to the people in your life. The guilt you carried about being selfish can dissolve as you realize that self-neglect was actually making you less available, not more. Love scarcity appears as the fear that loving yourself somehow reduces the love available for others, or that there aren't enough people in the world capable of appreciating your authentic nature. This scarcity belief often leads to self-criticism, to save love for others, and settling for relationships that don't truly nourish you because you don't believe better connections are possible. The abundance truth reveals that love, perhaps more than any other human experience, multiplies when shared rather than diminishing. The more thoroughly you learn to appreciate your own sensitivity, creativity, and caring nature, the more capacity you develop for recognizing and celebrating these qualities in others. Self-love doesn't compete with other love. It provides the foundation that makes genuine other love possible. Opportunity scarcity shows up as the belief that the world doesn't have enough space for people with your particular gifts, that success requires hardening yourself against your natural sweetness, that opportunities go to those who are tougher or more willing to manipulate others. This scarcity story often leads to either dimming your authentic light to fit in better, or giving up on pursuits that matter to you because they seem incompatible with your nature. The abundance perspective recognizes that the world's challenges actually create unprecedented opportunities for people with your gifts. The increasing rates of anxiety, depression, and disconnection in modern society reflect, in part, a cultural hunger for the very qualities you embody naturally. Your empathy, authenticity, and commitment to genuine connection aren't outdated luxuries. They're increasingly essential skills for navigating a complex, interconnected world. Values clarification from acceptance and commitment. Therapy provides a powerful tool for shifting from scarcity to abundance thinking. When you connect deeply with what matters most to you, perhaps compassion, authenticity, growth, connection, creativity, or service, you begin to recognize that living these values creates a sense of inner richness that doesn't depend on external circumstances. Consider the difference between goals and values in terms of abundance. Goals are finite. Once achieved, they're completed. Values are infinite. They can be expressed continuously in countless ways throughout your life. If your sense of abundance depends on achieving specific goals, getting a certain job, finding a particular relationship, reaching a defined level of success, you'll always feel vulnerable as to scarcity because goals can be thwarted by external circumstances. But if your sense of abundance comes from living your values, you have access to richness in every moment. You can express compassion with a difficult coworker, authenticity in a challenging conversation, creativity in solving a mundane problem, service in small acts of kindness. These opportunities for values-based living exist regardless of your external circumstances, creating an internal sense of sufficiency that no external event can threaten. The process of rewriting your personal narrative from scarcity to abundance begins with examining the stories you tell yourself about your place in the world. Many sweet souls carry unconscious narratives that position them as victims of a harsh world, damaged goods that must be fixed before they can be worthy of love, or beautiful anomalies that don't quite fit in modern society. From victim to author. Instead of "the world is too harsh for someone like me," try "I'm learning to navigate the world's challenges while maintaining my authentic nature. My sensitivity helps me notice things others miss, and my kindness creates connections that make life meaningful for everyone involved." From broken to growing. Instead of "I'm too sensitive and need to fix myself," consider "I'm developing the skills to honor both my sensitivity and my strength. My emotional awareness is a gift that requires conscious cultivation, not a flaw that needs correction." From anomaly to pioneer. Instead of "people like me don't belong in this competitive world," try "the world needs what I offer precisely because it's become so focused on competition. My commitment to collaboration and authentic connection helps create the changes many people are longing for." These narrative shifts don't require denying real challenges or pretending that being a sweet soul in a sometimes harsh world is always easy. They do require recognizing that your story is still being written and you have significant influence over how the next chapters unfold. Practical abundance cultivation involves specific practices that train your mind to notice sufficiency rather than lack. Gratitude expansion goes beyond simple thankfulness to active appreciation for the richness already present in your life. Instead of just noting things you're grateful for, practice deeply feeling appreciation for your capacity to love, your ability to notice beauty, your strength in difficult times, your connections with others who share your values. Generosity experiments involve giving from overflow rather than depletion. When you're feeling full, emotionally, energetically, spiritually, practice offering something to others and notice how this giving affects your sense of abundance. You might offer a compliment, a moment of genuine attention, a small act of service, or simply your authentic presence. Sufficiency awareness involves regularly noticing evidence that you have enough of what you truly need in this moment. This doesn't mean pretending that you don't have goals or desires for change, but recognizing that you have sufficient resources to handle whatever you're currently facing. The abundance mindset becomes particularly powerful for sweet souls when you realize that your natural gifts actually operate according to abundance rather than scarcity principles. Empathy doesn't get used up when you feel others' emotions. It develops and deepens with practice. Authenticity doesn't become harder when you express it. It becomes more natural and attractive. Kindness doesn't weaken you when you offer it consciously. It strengthens both you and the recipients. This recognition transforms how you approach relationships, work, and life decisions. Instead of carefully rationing your sweetness to avoid depletion, you can express it fully, knowing that conscious expression from a well-tended foundation actually enhances rather than diminishes your reserves. Instead of dimming your authentic light to conserve energy, you can let it shine freely, trusting that your genuineness attracts the people and opportunities that truly align with your values. The shift from scarcity to abundance thinking is gradual and requires patience with yourself as old patterns surface. Notice when scarcity fears arise, the worry that caring for yourself is selfish, the concern that there aren't enough good people in the world, the fear that being authentic will lead to rejection. Meet these fears with compassion while gently redirecting your attention toward evidence of abundance in your actual experience. This transformation ripples outward in beautiful ways. As you begin operating from abundance, you naturally inspire others to question their own scarcity assumptions. Your willingness to be generous with your authentic self gives others permission to do the same. Your confidence in your sweetness as a strength encourages other sensitive souls to embrace rather than hide their nature. Most importantly, the abundance mindset frees you to make decisions based on what truly serves your growth and well-being, rather than on fear of not having enough. You can pursue work that aligns with your values rather than settling for what feels safe. You can invest in relationships that truly nourish you rather than accepting whatever connection is available. You can express your authentic self rather than hiding behind personas designed to conserve resources. This is the gift that abundance thinking offers to sweet souls, the recognition that the world is large enough, rich enough, and diverse enough to not only accommodate your authentic nature, but to be enriched by it. Your sensitivity isn't a burden the world barely tolerates. It's a gift the world desperately needs. Your authenticity isn't a luxury for easier times. It's exactly what these complex times require. Your kindness isn't naive optimism. It's sophisticated strength that understands how connection and collaboration create better outcomes for everyone. Cultivating optimism as sweet strength. In a world that often confuses optimism with naivety and sweetness with weakness, learning to maintain hope and enthusiasm becomes both a personal practice and a quiet act of resistance. For sweet souls, optimism isn't just a pleasant emotional state. It's a sophisticated survival skill that allows you to remain open-hearted in difficult circumstances, to maintain your capacity for connection when others withdraw, and to continue believing in possibilities when evidence seems scarce. True optimism for sweet souls is far more complex than simply thinking positive thoughts. It's a multifaceted practice that includes realistic assessment of challenges, conscious choice about where to focus your attention, and deep faith in your ability to navigate difficulties while maintaining your essential nature. This kind of optimism doesn't deny the existence of pain, injustice, or hardship. It maintains hope and agency in the face of these realities. The foundation of sustainable optimism lies in understanding what you can and cannot control in any given situation. Sweet souls often exhaust themselves trying to manage other people's emotions, fix systemic problems single-handedly, or prevent all possible sources of pain in their environments. This impossible effort to control the uncontrollable naturally leads to frustration, burnout, and eventual pessimism about your ability to make a meaningful difference. The Serenity Prayer offers profound wisdom for sweet souls. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. For optimistic living, this translates into focusing your energy and attention on the aspects of any situation where you have genuine influence, while accepting with grace the aspects that remain beyond your control. Imagine you are an advocate for a cause you care about deeply, but your optimism has been crushed by the magnitude of the challenge and the apparent indifference of others. This pessimism is often a form of misplaced responsibility, trying to carry the weight of problems that belong to everyone. Through reconnecting with your core motivation, your love for the cause, and your desire to contribute, you can realize that optimism becomes sustainable when you focus on your sphere of influence. You can educate others, make conscious choices in your own life, and model the change you want to see. The larger situation may remain serious, but your optimism can be restored when you ground it in your own capacity for meaningful action rather than in outcomes you cannot control. This example illustrates a crucial principle for sweet souls. Optimism becomes sustainable when it's based on your ability to live your values rather than on your ability to control results. You can maintain hope about your capacity to express kindness regardless of how others respond. You can remain enthusiastic about learning and growing regardless of external recognition. You can stay committed to authenticity regardless of whether it's always appreciated. Solution-focused thinking provides a practical framework for directing your mental energy toward possibilities rather than problems. This doesn't mean ignoring difficulties, but rather training your attention to automatically search for potential pathways forward rather than getting stuck in analysis of what's wrong. When faced with a challenge, solution-focused thinking asks, what would improvement look like? What resources do I have available? What's one small step I could take toward a positive outcome? Who might be able to help? What have I learned from similar challenges in the past? These questions activate your creative problem-solving abilities and maintain your sense of agency, even in difficult circumstances. Sweet souls often get trapped in what psychologists call rumination, repetitive focus on problems without movement toward solutions. Your natural empathy means you feel others' pain deeply, and your desire to help can lead to endless mental loops about situations you cannot directly change. Solution-focused thinking provides an alternative. Acknowledge the reality of problems while directing your mental energy toward identifying possibilities for positive action. Mindful appreciation involves cultivating grateful awareness for everyday beauty and kindness. This practice is particularly powerful for sweet souls because your natural sensitivity means you're already primed to notice subtle positive experiences that others might miss. The key is learning to consciously savor and absorb these moments rather than rushing past them in search of the next source of concern. Mindful appreciation might involve pausing to truly notice the warmth in a friend's voice during a phone call, savoring the feeling of sunlight on your skin during a brief outdoor moment, or allowing yourself to be moved by a stranger's kindness to their child. These micro moments of appreciation train your brain to notice positive experiences with the same intensity it naturally brings to negative ones. This practice doesn't require life to be problem-free or even particularly pleasant. Some of the most profound appreciation can arise in the midst of difficulty. Gratitude for your own resilience in handling a challenging day. Appreciation for the friend who listened without trying to fix your problems. Recognition of your courage in facing something that scared you. Sacred persistence represents optimism as a form of endurance fuel specifically designed for sweet souls. This concept recognizes that your natural empathy and authenticity require sustained commitment in a world that doesn't always reward these qualities immediately. Sacred persistence involves understanding your optimism as a spiritual practice that honors both your gifts and your responsibility to share them with the world. Think of sacred persistence as the inner flame that continues burning regardless of external weather conditions. This flame isn't fed by constant external validation or immediate visible results. It's nourished by your connection to values, purpose, and the deep knowing that your authentic self has something important to offer the world. You can practice sacred persistence by viewing each small, positive interaction with others as inherently meaningful, regardless of larger problems you cannot solve. When a friend in crisis expresses gratitude for simply being heard, when a colleague's mood lifts after a moment of connection, when a family member begins to communicate more openly, these moments can become the fuel for your optimism. They are evidence that your presence matters, even when larger systems remain flawed. Sacred persistence also involves what we might call directional optimism, maintaining hope about the general direction of growth and healing, even when progress feels slow or uncertain. This perspective recognizes that meaningful change often happens in cycles and waves rather than straight lines, and that your contribution matters even when its effects aren't immediately visible. Cognitive diffusion. Techniques from acceptance and commitment therapy help maintain optimism by creating healthy distance from pessimistic thoughts. When your mind generates thoughts like, kindness is weakness, or the world is becoming too harsh for people like me, diffusion practices help you recognize these as mental events, rather than factual statements. One simple diffusion technique involves prefacing difficult thoughts with, I'm having the thought that, or my mind is telling me that. This small shift creates psychological space between you and the thought, reducing its emotional impact and allowing you to evaluate its usefulness more objectively. Another diffusion practice involves visualizing pessimistic thoughts as weather patterns moving through the sky of your consciousness. Just as you couldn't identify yourself as a storm cloud that happens to be passing overhead, you can learn to observe negative thoughts as temporary mental events rather than permanent features of your reality. The practice of diffusion is particularly valuable for sweet souls because your natural sensitivity means you feel the emotional impact of thoughts very intensely. Learning to create some distance from pessimistic mental content allows you to maintain your emotional availability for positive experiences and possibilities. Values-based affirmations provide another tool for cultivating sustainable optimism. Unlike generic positive statements that might feel forced or inauthentic, values-based affirmations connect your optimistic outlook to your deepest commitments and authentic strengths. Instead of trying to convince yourself that everything always works out perfectly, you might affirm, I have the strength and wisdom to handle whatever challenges arise. Instead of forcing the belief that everyone appreciates my sensitivity, you could affirm, my empathy is a gift that helps me create meaningful connections with people who value authentic relationships. These values-based affirmations feel more authentic because they're grounded in your actual capabilities and commitments rather than in desired external outcomes. They maintain optimism by focusing on what you can genuinely influence, your character, your choices, your growth, your expression of values, rather than on what you cannot control. The cultivation of optimism as sweet strength also involves developing what researchers call post-traumatic growth, the ability to find meaning, develop resilience, and even discover new possibilities through difficult experiences. This doesn't mean being grateful for trauma or pretending that painful experiences are blessings in disguise. It does mean maintaining openness to learning and growth even in the midst of genuine hardship. For sweet souls, post-traumatic growth often involves discovering that your sensitivity, rather than being a liability that makes life harder, actually provides valuable information and connection opportunities that others miss. The same emotional depth that makes you vulnerable to pain also makes you capable of profound joy, meaningful relationships, and intuitive wisdom that can guide you through complexity. The practice of optimistic living requires balancing hope with realism, maintaining faith in possibilities while honestly acknowledging current challenges. This balance prevents both naive optimism that ignores real problems and cynical pessimism that overlooks genuine opportunities for positive change. Sustainable optimism for sweet souls ultimately rests on the recognition that your authentic nature is not a problem to be solved, but a gift to be shared. The world's increasing complexity and disconnection create unprecedented opportunities for people with your gifts. Your capacity for empathy, authenticity, and genuine connection aren't outdated luxuries. They're essential skills for creating a world that works better for everyone. This optimism becomes a form of service to others as well as self-care for yourself. When you maintain hope and enthusiasm in the face of difficulty, you provide evidence to other sweet souls that it's possible to remain tender-hearted without being broken-hearted. Your optimism becomes a beacon that helps others navigate their own challenges without hardening their hearts or dimming their authentic light. The practice deepens over time as you accumulate evidence that optimistic approaches often create better outcomes than pessimistic ones. You begin to notice that your hope and enthusiasm are contagious, inspiring others to approach challenges with greater creativity and resilience. You discover that maintaining faith in possibilities actually increases the likelihood that positive possibilities will manifest. This is the ultimate gift that optimism offers to sweet souls. The recognition that your hope itself is a creative force in the world, that your enthusiasm generates energy that benefits everyone around you, and that your faith in the possibility of kindness, authenticity, and genuine connection helps create more of these qualities in your environment. The sweet art of perspective, integration, and daily practice. As our exploration of perspective transformation draws to a close, we arrive at perhaps the most beautiful truth of all. The skills you've been developing aren't just psychological techniques or philosophical concepts. They're the practical tools that allow you to live as a fully realized sweet soul in an increasingly complex world. Every reframe you choose, every limiting belief you challenge, every pessimistic thought you transform into encouragement represents a quiet act of revolution that changes not only your own experience, but ripples outward to touch everyone whose life intersects with yours. The integration of these perspective skills creates what we might call sweet resilience, the remarkable ability to remain tender-hearted while growing stronger, to stay open to life's beauty while developing wisdom about its challenges, to maintain your capacity for authentic connection while learning to protect your energy and well-being. This resilience doesn't ask you to choose between kindness and strength, between sensitivity and competence, between caring deeply and living successfully. Consider the profound transformation that occurs when all these perspective skills work together. When you encounter criticism, you automatically check whether it contains useful information while refusing to accept it as evidence of your fundamental inadequacy. When someone doesn't reciprocate your warmth, you naturally interpret this as information about compatibility rather than proof of your unworthiness. When the world seems harsh or challenging, you instinctively look for evidence of beauty, kindness, and possibility while taking realistic action to address genuine problems. This integration creates a feedback loop of positive experience that strengthens with practice. As your perspective skills improve, you naturally attract more positive relationships and opportunities because you're operating from confidence rather than desperation, from abundance rather than scarcity, from hope rather than fear. These improved external circumstances provide more evidence for optimistic interpretations, which further strengthen your perspective skills and create even better outcomes. Daily perspective practice, a sustainable framework. The transformation of perspective happens not through dramatic revelations, but through consistent daily practice applied to ordinary experiences. The most profound changes emerge from small, repeated choices to interpret your life through lenses that support your growth and well-being. Morning perspective setting begins each day with conscious intention about how you want to interpret whatever experiences unfold. This isn't about predicting or controlling outcomes, but about choosing the interpretive stance that will serve you best regardless of what happens. You might set intentions like, Today I'll interpret challenges as opportunities to practice my strengths, or I'll assume positive intent from others unless clearly shown otherwise, or I'll focus my attention on evidence of beauty and kindness while taking realistic action where needed. This morning practice primes your mental filters to notice experiences that confirm your intentional perspectives. When you start the day looking for evidence of possibility and goodness, you discover that such evidence is abundantly available. When you begin with the assumption that your sweetness is a strength rather than a liability, you find more opportunities to express it confidently. Midday perspective check involves pausing periodically throughout your day to notice what stories you're telling yourself about your experiences. Are you interpreting that colleague's brief response as evidence that they don't like you, or as a sign that they're busy or distracted? Are you framing the project difficulties as proof that you're not qualified, or as normal challenges that provide valuable learning opportunities? This checking practice creates the space needed for conscious choice. Instead of letting automatic interpretations drive your emotional responses, you can pause and ask, is this interpretation serving my well-being? Are there other ways to understand what's happening? What perspective would allow me to respond most skillfully? Evening perspective integration provides time to reflect on how your perspective choices affected your experience throughout the day. Which interpretations led to positive emotions and effective actions? Which automatic thoughts might have been questioned more carefully? What evidence did you notice today that supports optimistic, empowering ways of understanding your life? This evening practice isn't about judging your performance or trying to achieve perfect positivity. It's about learning from your experience and gradually building more conscious awareness of how perspective choice shapes everything else. Over time, you'll notice patterns in your automatic interpretations and develop more skillful responses to recurring challenges. The compound effect of small transformations. The power of perspective transformation lies not in dramatic overnight changes, but in the compound effect of small shifts repeated consistently over time. Each time you choose to interpret rejection as redirection rather than personal failure, you build neural pathways that make optimistic interpretation more automatic. Each time you reframe criticism as information rather than attack, you strengthen your capacity to receive feedback without being overwhelmed by it. These small changes accumulate into profound transformations of your entire life experience. Situations that once triggered shame and self-doubt begin to feel manageable and even interesting. Relationships that seemed threatening or demanding become opportunities for authentic connection and mutual growth. Challenges that appeared overwhelming reveal themselves as chances to develop strength and wisdom. Imagine discovering this compound effect after a few months of consistent perspective practice. Gradually, you might notice that criticisms no longer send you into spirals of self-doubt. Difficult cases become interesting puzzles rather than evidence of your inadequacy. Conflicts with others transform from relationship threats into opportunities for clearer communication. Most remarkably, your increased confidence in your own competence will make you more effective in your life. When you stop interpreting every difficult moment as proof of your failure, you become more present and creative in your responses. Your internal shift will create external changes that reinforce your new perspectives, creating an upward spiral of satisfaction and effectiveness. Creating environmental support for perspective transformation. While perspective change ultimately happens within your own mind, you can create external conditions that support and reinforce your new ways of thinking. This environmental support becomes particularly important during stressful periods when old patterns of interpretation feel more compelling. Surrounding yourself with growth-minded people provides regular exposure to alternative ways of interpreting challenges and setbacks. When your friends consistently frame difficulties as learning opportunities rather than personal failures, their perspective becomes part of your mental environment. When your colleagues approach criticism as useful information rather than personal attack, their responses model more skillful ways of handling feedback. This doesn't mean avoiding all people who struggle with pessimism or self-doubt. You may have family members or long-term friends whose patterns differ from your own. It does mean consciously cultivating some relationships with people who share your commitment to growth and optimistic interpretation. Creating physical reminders of your perspective choices helps maintain awareness throughout busy days. This might involve keeping meaningful quotes on your desk, setting phone reminders to pause and check your interpretations, or placing objects in your environment that remind you of your core values and strengths. Limiting exposure to unnecessarily negative media protects your mental environment from constant bombardment with pessimistic interpretations of world events. This doesn't mean avoiding all difficult news or pretending problems don't exist. It means consuming information in ways that support your ability to respond constructively rather than being overwhelmed by the magnitude of global challenges. Building regular practices that reinforce optimistic thinking creates consistent opportunities to strengthen your perspective skills. This might include gratitude journaling, meditation practice, reading inspirational material, engaging in creative activities, or spending time in nature. These practices provide regular doses of positive input that counterbalance the natural human tendency to focus on problems and threats. The Sweet Revolutionary, changing the world through perspective. Perhaps the most profound aspect of perspective transformation for sweet souls is recognizing that your internal work has external impact far beyond your own life. When you learn to interpret experiences through lenses of hope, growth, and possibility, you become a source of these qualities for everyone around you. Your optimism becomes contagious, your resilience inspiring, your faith in human goodness a gift to others who may have lost their own. This influence operates mostly beneath the surface of conscious awareness. People may not be able to articulate what feels different about interacting with someone who has developed skillful perspective practices, but they sense it nonetheless. Your confidence in your own worth gives others permission to value themselves. Your refusal to interpret setbacks as catastrophes models resilience for others facing their own challenges. Your ability to find meaning and possibility in difficult circumstances provides hope for others who feel overwhelmed by their problems. In this way, your perspective practice becomes a form of quiet activism, a way of contributing to positive change in the world that operates through influence rather than force, through inspiration rather than argument, through invitation rather than demand. You become part of what we might call the Sweet Revolution, a gradual transformation of human consciousness that happens one relationship, one interaction, one moment at a time. The ripples of your perspective transformation extend far beyond what you can track or measure. The colleague who feels encouraged by your resilient response to criticism may approach their own challenges differently. The friend who witnesses your ability to find meaning in difficult experiences may discover new possibilities in their own setbacks. The family member who observes your skillful boundary setting may learn to protect their own energy while maintaining loving connections. These secondary effects multiply exponentially as the people you influence carry your example into their own relationships and communities. The perspective skills you develop don't just change your life, they contribute to a cultural shift toward more optimistic, empowering ways of understanding human experience. The continuing journey. As we conclude this exploration of perspective transformation, remember that you've been learning skills that will serve you throughout your entire life. The ability to consciously choose your interpretations, challenge limiting beliefs, and maintain optimistic outlook in the face of difficulty isn't a destination you reach. It's a practice you refine continuously as you encounter new challenges and opportunities. There will be times when old patterns of interpretation resurface, when criticism stings despite your best efforts to reframe it constructively, when the world's challenges feel overwhelming despite your commitment to hope. These moments aren't failures. They're normal parts of the human experience and opportunities to deepen your practice. During difficult periods, return to the basic principles you have learned. You cannot control what happens to you, but you have complete sovereignty over how you interpret what happens. Your perspectives are choices, not facts. Your sweet nature is a strength that can be skillfully expressed rather than a vulnerability that must be hidden. The world needs what you offer precisely because it contains challenges that your gifts can help address. Most importantly, remember that your perspective practice is simultaneously the most personal and most generous work you can do. By learning to interpret your own life through lenses of hope, growth, and possibility, you become a beacon of these qualities for everyone whose path crosses yours. Your optimism lights the way for other sweet souls to learning to navigate the world with open hearts and clear minds. The stones the world hands you need not build walls. With the perspective skills you've developed, they become stepping stones toward the light you wish to see, both for yourself and for the countless others who will be blessed by your presence in their lives. This is the gift of conscious perspective choice, the recognition that how you see the world isn't just about your own experience, but about the kind of world you're helping to create for everyone. As you move forward from this chapter into the deeper interpersonal work that awaits, carry with you the knowing that your perspective is your power, your interpretation is your art, and your optimism is your gift to a world that desperately needs to remember how to hope. The sweetness within you is not naive, it's wise. It's not weak, it's revolutionary. And it's not too much, it's exactly what this moment in history requires.